Had I been president at the time and I found that you did not read the cables from Benghazi, you did not read the cables from Ambassador Stevens, I would have relieved you of your post. I think it's inexcusable. Their lives could have been saved had someone been more available, had someone been aware of these things, more on top of the job.
I have submitted legislation to this committee, to the Congress, to fix this problem so future ARBs will not face the situation.
But here's the problem. The review board has all these recommendations, but there's one thing they failed to address, and I think you've failed to address, and it sets us up for another tragedy like this. They should have never been sent in there without a military guard. I think someone needs to make an executive decision. Someone needs to take leadership.
I believe in transparency. I believe in taking responsibility, and I have done so.
Well, give Rand a hand, even if you hate Rand a bit. So a few Democrats were thinking and saying as much today after that exchange, because no one got Hillary Clinton off her talking points so fast. The Kentucky senator getting in the secretary's face over a chain of Benghazi events he all but called a State Department farce. The man who took no prisoners on whether today he got any answers. Senator Paul, welcome. How did it go down, you think?
Well, you know, the one thing we learned for certain today is that she did not read the cables from Benghazi, these pleas for help, pleas for more security, which were unanswered and, in fact, refused by the State Department. She never read them before his death. And I think that's inexcusable. You know, Libya, who doesn't know that Libya is probably one of the most dangerous countries in the world? I know she can't read the cables from every country in the world, but for goodness sakes, you'd think she'd be right on top of security for Libya. And I don't think we've fully come to grips with what we need to do. I think we're in danger of another tragedy in Libya or other war-torn countries because we have like 1 or 2 Marines there and their job is to protect records. I think in a war-torn country, we treat it as a war and we don't treat it as the same as Paris Embassy or London's embassy. And I don't think they've completely understood that yet.
Yeah, you know, I spent a good deal of time watching events today, your sharp questioning included. And I thought there was a lot of rearview mirror looking. I mean, what led to these events? And you tried to connect what happened to what could happen again if we're not careful, raising the distinct possibility here that we seem to have learned little and seem to have exposed ourselves to just this sort of, you didn't say it in as many words, happening again. Thousands of vulnerable Americans who are, you know, you got to be careful how you say it, ripe for the picking here because we've learned very little from this.
Well, see, I think Tripoli has more in common with Baghdad than it does with Paris. And I think the State Department treats Libya and Tripoli like Paris instead of treating it like Baghdad. When we set it up an embassy in Baghdad as the war came to a conclusion, still to this day, it's protected by a fortress and protected by thousands of armed guards and Marines. And that's the way I would treat Libya. That's the way I'd treat several other countries that are unstable and don't have stable governments. But here's the question I would have asked Secretary Clinton if I got a chance is, when she goes to a foreign country, does a militia guard her? Would she have an unofficial militia guarding her? I think that's such a huge error of judgment that I think it really disqualifies her from making these decisions. And that's why I was hard on her, because I think if there's a time in the future when she wants to make these decisions, she's still going to have to answer for the bad decisions she made as Secretary of State.
Maybe, but I think she got a pass today. There were some tough questions like yourself now and then, but I think she got a pass. And maybe it's just the nature of the hearing setup, Senator, where, you know, one guy gets 5 minutes, the other guy gets 5 minutes, but it's back and forth, Republican, Democrat. Sometimes they're on top of their questions, and then the other guy isn't. And away we go. And it's, to me, and I don't mean to be disrespectful of the system, but for nothing.
Well, hopefully we got some answers. One, that they weren't on top of security, they weren't reading the security cables. And the other point I made, and this has always disturbed me, the original 9/11, I was a doctor in private practice in Kentucky, but after that I was disturbed that we had this huge investigation and then no one lost their job. That's what I'm disturbed about this, too.
What did you think of her defense? There is a system in place for how you get rid of federal workers over which she has no control. It is something that's weird in Washington, but that's the way Washington works. That's not her fault.
Here's the system for federal employees.
Right.
It's impossible to get rid of a federal employee. But here's my point. I don't think they're bad people. They're probably good family people. I don't think Secretary Clinton's a bad person. So I don't think she willfully did anything wrong, and that's the way they measure this. Did you willfully do anything wrong? I don't question their motives. They're probably all good Americans, but they made judgment errors that really should disqualify them from making these judgments again. They should not be put in a position. This includes Secretary Clinton. She should never again be in a position to make judgment calls about security because she made terrible errors of judgment. So did the people who are directly involved in this.
She's not being
and I think it precludes them.
She's not being held. She's, what, 16, 17 years running the most respected woman in the world. She's all but running for president in a few years. I could be wrong. But none of this seems to have hurt her. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I think we'll see. I think there hasn't been a full discussion of this. I think we got sidetracked about talking about whether the movie caused this, and we haven't been talking enough about the judgment errors. And a ridiculous amount of time over Republicans. They talk about the best defense being a good offense. Well, the Republicans were to blame for this by cutting funding to our embassies as if there was a quid pro quo. But they turned this on Republicans, or she did. I was amazed by that. Yeah, but the other thing is a couple of things I brought up in the hearing that I'm sure she's not really aware of, but her staff, her State Department, spent $100,000 putting electrical charging stations in Vienna. They spent $100,000 on 3 comedians they sent to India. They spent $80 million on a consulate in Mashar al-Sharif that will never be opened. $80 million flushed down the drain. So that's just bad management, which goes back to judgment again. If she's not aware of where her money's being spent and it's being wasted around the world, she has no ability to come back and say, oh, woe is me, I didn't have enough money for this. Also, if you look at total security in the State Department, it went up 36% since the year 2007. So there's no excuse for that. It's just bad management.
Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rand Paul.